if you didn't notice, this is a little different than normal Vox. Did you notice? Yeah. Okay. Hey, so this is really cool. We are part of a growing church, and our church, it's been growing. In fact, Vox alone, I don't know if you guys know this. I don't know that I talk about it to you guys often, but this Vox alone has broken the all-time Vox attendance records 4 times already in the last 6 months. There's just so many students showing up. It's amazing. It's amazing. Okay, but our church is growing as well. And so on Sundays, we've been running out of room in our main auditorium space. So this week, they've been cutting the stage so that we can make more room in there. And so tonight we're in here while they work on that project. And how many of you, this is just kind of fun. I know a lot of you are new. How many of you, though, were at this church when you were in kid life, you were in this space? Anybody go way back? Okay, fantastic. All right, there's no bleachers for you to sit in, or somebody threw out boats, and I don't know how many people remember sitting in boats in this room, but I'm glad y'all are here. Okay, let's get in it. How many of you, all right, it shouldn't be how many, does anyone in this room, anybody know a lady, and I want to pronounce her name best I can, Agnes Gonje Boyishiu? Anybody? Let me say it again. Agnes Gonje Boyishiu. No, I didn't think so. But maybe she changed her name later in life, and maybe you might recognize a lady named Mother Teresa. Anybody? Okay, all right. So Mother Teresa is, or was, she was a woman who, in the 1940s, there was a time she was praying, and she felt like she had a conversation with God, and God said, I want you to go to India and care for people. And so in 1948, she moved to Calcutta, India, to begin working. And her goal, what she felt like God had asked her to do, was work with the poorest of the poor, the most disadvantaged, the people who had the least. So originally, she moved, and while she was doing medical training, she started to teach classes, and so she worked on opening a school, and then she opened a medical clinic, and then she opened a hospice, and then she opened an orphanage, and as that began to grow and her ministry grew, people started to flock and they wanted to help. And then it started to get the attention of people in India and people outside of India. And eventually, her ministry would begin to grow. She died in 1997. But since she started in 1948, her organization ended up in 133 countries. She, at one point, it had 4,500 people serving there, which literally means that tens of thousands of people with diseases were cared for. Thousands and thousands of orphans had homes. Thousands and thousands of people dying had comfort. The work that she did was incredible, and it got the entire world's attention. There were so many people who looked at her life and said, man, I don't know what I believe about God, but what I see her doing is incredible. And there were people who gave their lives to Jesus because they saw what she did. There are people who were recipients of what she did who gave their lives to Jesus because they knew and experienced. But this is why she did what she did. She once said this. She said, I see Jesus in every human being. And I say to myself, this is hungry Jesus, I must feed him. This is sick Jesus. This one has leprosy, which is a skin disease, or gangrene. I must wash him and tend to him. I serve because I love Jesus. People that knew her well knew that she would describe her ministry as the five-finger gospel. Everybody do this. Just do this. Five-finger gospel. Here's what she would say. She would say, I live the five-finger gospel, and it's 5 words. You did it to me. So when people asked her, why are you doing this? She said, you did it to me. Now that comes from what many think was her life verse. This idea, what you did to me, comes from her life verse in Matthew 25:40, where Jesus talks about what you did for the least you did to me. So she believed and acted that what would happen is when you served people, you got to experience or encounter God. So we're in a series right now called Encountering God. If it's your first night or your second night, or you jumped in when we were doing red carpet or senior night, you're like halfway through. And let me catch you up real quick. I think there's a lot of young people who are like, man, I'm interested in God, or I'm interested in God things, or my friend drugged me to church and said it wasn't going to be that boring. And so you're here, and I'm glad you're here. And but what we're trying to accomplish is a conversation about, hey, if I wanted to grow closer to God, how do I do that? If I wanted to have a relationship with God, how would I do that? What does that look like to experience God? What does it look like to encounter God? What does it look like to have this kind of thing? And there's one pastor named Pastor John Thompson who, the first time I ever heard about serving as this, it was in a sermon that he did, and he said that when you serve people, it's a guaranteed place of meeting with Jesus. And I thought that was I don't know, that's a promise. You ever see a commercial and you're like, that is not as good as that commercial looks, right? Like you see stuff, you're like, I mean, ads pop up on YouTube all the time, and they're like, this will revolutionize your life, and you're like, no, it's not. Get out, right? So, but he said, hey, serving people is a guaranteed place where you can encounter Jesus. And Mother Teresa said the same thing, and it comes from something in the book of Matthew, chapter 25. So if you got a Bible tonight, I want you to go there, Matthew chapter 25, and we're going to be looking at, starting in verse 31, we're going to be looking at this story, and it's the piece that Mother Teresa based her life, she based her whole ministry on. She based all of it on this idea that, man, I can meet with Jesus if I care for people. And I think one of the things that I want to really convince you of is that all of you have opportunity, all of you have time, all of you have, and you have gifts and talents too. Like, y'all aren't too shabby. You've got things that this world needs. In fact, I'm convinced that the reason that God gave you life is because He has mission for you. That's what Ephesians says in the Bible. It says that God gave you life because there are good things that God in advance was like, oh, only Jeremiah can do this. Only Stephanie can do this. Only Ashton can do this. And I hope that they would see this mission through, right? So there's stuff that only you can do that's good that we need you to do. And so I want you to see something tonight. I want you to see what drove thousands of people to care for tens of thousands. I want you to see what it's like to see Jesus in when you serve people. All right, so Matthew 25, this is a big sermon that Jesus gave one time. Jesus gave a sermon one time, and he told some little stories called parables, and these are long metaphors. But when he gets to Matthew 25, a lot of Bible scholars go, I don't know that we could call this a parable anymore, because he starts to get pretty specific. Matthew 25, verse 31. Here's what it says. But when the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he will sit upon his glorious throne. So there's a lot of things in here. Let me catch you up real fast. Jesus is saying, the Son of Man was a nickname that Jesus used for himself, right? So that would be, I don't know, like I imagine if Jesus was alive today, that would be his Snapchat handle. Like that would be his like Son of Man, right? Like, so Jesus is at Son of Man, and he says, when I come back, Jesus is gone right now. He's in heaven. He says, when I come back in glory and I come with the angels, and then the world as we know it is going to end in some way, and there's going to be a moment where Jesus is going to sit on a throne, and it says he's going to make all things right. Here's what it says. All the nations, everybody who's ever lived, everybody. All the peoples, say all. Everybody. There it is. All the nations will be gathered in his presence. And he says this, he will separate the people as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. Now, that's kind of a, I don't know, any of y'all ever worked with a herd of sheep or goats? Like I imagine, yeah, none of you. Okay, great. So in where Jesus grows up in Israel, in this place, everybody's really familiar with sheep herds and goat herds, right? Like everybody's got them, and so and here's the thing: sheep in Israel look like goats in Israel. They actually look really similar, and so what would happen is usually when they go to, maybe at night or something like that, or when it was time to like eat something, you would bring the herds in and you'd separate them. And so the shepherd would go there, and he would have to be very intentional about like, okay, sheep over here, you're not a sheep, you're a goat, you're over here, okay, sheep here, goat here, this is what we're doing, all right, this kind of thing. And so he's separating, and he's going, all right, this over here, and then I'm pretty confident too that goats tend to not, because they don't have like wool, right? So they get a little colder, so they need to be in a warm spot. They need to be a little cozy, you know, a little comf. So they go in their own space. The sheep go in their own space. They separate them. But Jesus says, at the end of the world, he says, I'm going to separate. I'm going to be on a throne, and I'm going to separate two kinds of people out of everybody. And sheep will go on one side, goats will go on the other side. And then he goes on to begin to describe what this is. Verse 33. He says, he will place the sheep at his right hand and the goats at his left. Then the king, who is also, it's Jesus, right? He's the Son of Man, he's the king. The king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the creation of the world. My goodness. Y'all, what a all right, wait. So, sometimes some of you are like, hey, what is heaven like? What is heaven like? What is heaven going to be like? And I often really stumble over that question. Some of you are like, what's heaven like? And I'm like, because I think anything that I could ever say will be a disservice and an injustice to what heaven actually is. Like, I don't know about you, but think right now of the biggest surprise that has ever been planned for you, right? Like maybe there was a big birthday that somebody planned for you. Maybe there was a great gift that somebody planned for you. Maybe there was some kind of celebration. Maybe somebody asked you out or to a dance, or like there was a big thing of preparation that went into making you smile. But here's the deal. Jesus describes heaven as, guess what? God, since the creation of the world, has been working on a place for you to go to. I got goosebumps, right, y'all? Like, wait. Can you imagine, like, here's the deal. Your boyfriend spent 2 weeks trying to do something really cute for you, but God has spent thousands of years prepping for you. Right? Your mom did something really nice. They set up, they decorated your bedroom. It was a whole deal. But literally, God's been going, oh, wait till you see this. Do you feel the difference? So like to the sheep over here, he goes, oh man. Hey, get ready. Get ready because God's been preparing a place for you. You get to inherit this kingdom. Come on, sheep, let's go. Verse 35, he tells them why they became sheep. He says this, I was hungry and you fed me. And I was thirsty and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger and you invited me into your home. I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you cared for me. I was in prison and you visited me. What's interesting is that the people that were right on the right side of Jesus, the people that he called sheep, the people that he said, hey, you get to enter into the kingdom that God has been preparing since the creation of the world, this thing that he's excited about, that he can't wait for. Here's why you get in. He says, because you served me. And he said, there was a time that I was hungry and you shared some fries. And I was thirsty and you grabbed the second straw. And I didn't have a shirt and you reached into the back of your car and you found a shirt for me. And he says, he goes on and on and on. He says, you cared for me. You cared for me. Those are the ones who made it on this. They're the ones that Jesus said, hey, you served me. Now, here's the thing. We're at a disadvantage because Jesus has already gone back to heaven. It's been about 2,000 years since he's been chilling on this earth. So that could be absolutely terrible news for us going, man, I did not have a chance. I promise you, if I had seen Jesus, I would have hooked Jesus up, right? Like if Jesus were alive today, I feel like I would have been really nice to him, you know? Like, and I think most of us in this room would say the same thing. We'd be like, hey, if Jesus were here now, I would let him hang out with me, right? I would just be. But it continues because this is a scene that is actually really confusing in heaven. Verse 37, it says the righteous ones, the one that he called sheep, the ones that are on the right side, he says, then these righteous ones will reply, Lord, when did we ever see you hungry and feed you? Or thirsty and give you something to drink? Or a stranger and show you hospitality? Or naked and give you clothing? When did we ever see you sick or in prison and visit you? Man, there's a song that I remember hearing when growing up. My parents would play it. My parents loved this Christian artist from the 60s and 70s named Keith Green. Mom, where are you at? That's just, yeah, you're welcome. And right, Keith Green had a song called The Sheep and the Goats. And you know what? I almost played it for you, Vox, but he is so 1960s, it's unreal. And the footage is so bad, and that man is playing piano, and he looks like Bob Ross, and he's going, like he's going off, right? It's the craziest thing. You look it up. Go home, look it up. You can laugh. But he sings something in that song because he's retelling this story, and I don't forget it. It stuck with me. He said, there's going to be people in heaven, and Jesus says, you did these things. And they said, Jesus, when did we see you hungry and feed you? When were you thirsty and we hooked you up? When were you naked and we clothed you? When were you sick and we made you better? Because Jesus, if I'm honest, I would never forget your face. Jesus, if I fed a lot of people, but I don't remember you. Jesus, I talked to a lot of people that were sick, and I prayed over them, and we tried to help them get better, but I don't remember meeting you. And this is the part of this. This is where the five-finger gospel comes from. The very next verse, verse 40. It says, and the king will say, I tell you the truth. When you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you are doing it to me. King says, he says, I'll tell you the truth. He says, this is the truest thing I could say. He says, period. He says, this is it. The times that you served and cared for people, brothers and sisters who are less than you, when you served, every time you did that, it was like you did it for me. Jesus said, I saw. Hey, nobody else saw. He said, Jesus said, I saw when you were praying for those kids. Nobody else was there, but I saw that. Jesus says, I remember a time that you stopped and you had a conversation with a homeless guy, and nobody was there, but I was. I saw it. And when you did that to me. He said, and I saw that the years and years you spent pouring into that person. And you shared with them about me, and you cared for them, and you did all kind of, and every time I saw it. Jesus goes, what you did for the least of these, I saw. Basically, Jesus said, there's a lot of people that are forgotten. And there's a lot of people that are forgettable. There's some people who are going to make it and they're going to do fine and they don't need serving. And Jesus says, but when you took care of those that needed serving, he said, oh, I was there. Jesus said, what you did for them, you did for me. What Jesus ultimately says is that when you are serving, you can encounter Jesus there. Now, I don't want to oversell this and under-deliver, because the reality is I have spent most of my life serving. I grew up going to this church. In fact, when I was in middle school, I began to serve in our church running tech. And can I tell you, there were a million unspiritual moments in that. In fact, I've shared this story before. Some of you have heard it. I apologize. But one of the most memorable and probably worst moments in my serving history was when I was in middle school and I was serving in tech. And at that time, the tech booth had a giant bamboo wall. And so nobody could see us behind the booth. And one time during worship, me and my friends started to make wasps with rubber bands and folded up pieces of paper. And we were shooting them, and we hit kids while they were worshiping from the tech booth. And I remember we hit one kid. I'm sorry. Mason, if you ever see this, man, I'm so sorry. We hit this one kid who always got in trouble in kids ministry, and we hit him, and he walked up to the leader. We could hear the conversation. He walked up to the leader and was like, somebody hit me with this. And the leader was like, stop making up stuff, Mason. And we were like, yeah, Mason. Right? I mean, just absolutely egregious. Okay. Hey, you can absolutely serve and not encounter Jesus. But can I tell you that there are moments that serving that you encounter Jesus where you've never encountered him. And there will be moments when you're serving people that you see a side of God that you have never seen before. In fact, the Bible tells us, hey, if you want to have the same attitude as Jesus, here's what it looks like. It looks like extreme humility, where you're willing to serve and help. And listen, extreme humility is going to come. It's going to require, because there's plenty of moments, I promise you, plenty of moments where people are going to take advantage of your humility. They're going to take advantage of you serving. And you're going to be like, nah, not about that. Not about that at all. I mean, I can remember being in high school trying to serve. One of the things that I tried to do is I tried to gather some people's trash at the lunch table. And I would have people who be like, hey boy, come get this, right? Like, and I'm like, I'm gonna skip your seat. Right? I'm like, I'm just trying to be nice out here. And Jesus goes, yeah, that's it. Right? There's a place in serving. Here's the thing, small serving is big work. Let me say that again. Small serving is big work. Why? Because when you serve, Jesus can meet you there. I'm running out of time. There's so much that I want to say. Let me say this. The other half of that story, Jesus says, hey, goats, let me tell you why you're on this side. And he said, because there was a lot of moments where there were the least of these, and they were hungry, they were thirsty, they were sick, they were naked, they were in prison, they were all those things, and instead you ignored them. I don't know what you did. You were busy, you were doing those things, but you didn't do it when you had the chance. And actually one of the most harsh stories Jesus is telling this, it's not a parable. He says, depart from me into hell, which wasn't prepared for you. It was prepared for the devil and his angels. But he said, that's where you could go because you saw me. Here's what Jesus says. Because when you had the chance to see me, you ignored me. Because when you saw me in people who were less, when you saw me in people who needed serving, when you had the opportunity, you ignored that. In 1940, in Europe, Germany had begun they had begun World War II. They had moved in. They had annexed some places, and they started to declare war. Britain sent over troops. France was responding. The Netherlands were responding. Belgium was fighting back. And so you had all of these countries coming together to fight. But all of them underprepared. They had all expected, hey, we've got a ton of time, hey this. 2 days into the battle, the Netherlands surrendered, leaving a large gap. Three or 4 days into the battle, the French and British soldiers hadn't planned that Germany would attack through the middle, even though, this is hilarious now, even though the Vatican had told France and Britain, there's a 60-mile long stretch of soldiers coming through the center, you should prepare there. And they ignored the intelligence. And the Germans broke through, and they, in one move, were pinching the entire Allied forces. Winston Churchill heard about it, and he told the Allies that all of them had to retreat. 338,000 men fled for their lives through Europe to a place called Dunkirk in France. All of them expecting the end. Because when they were on the beaches of Dunkirk, they had to abandon all of their military equipment, and Germany was advancing. Winston Churchill expected, the Prime Minister of Britain, that they would only be able to save 20,000. It would be 328,000 soldiers that would die there. The entire British Army, the entire French military. They expected that this would be the greatest defeat in history, that this would be the end of the war for the Allies. There was this moment that those men sitting on that beach were without support. Germany was just going to come in with tanks. They were just going to fire on them. German bombers would come and they would kill them all as they sat on that beach. The King of England, King George the Sixth, called and he asked the nation to pray and pray to God and spend an entire day as a day of prayer, interceding. And so the nation began to pray. Everyone began to pray. And then a handful of little miracles happened. Look up the story of Dunkirk. It is incredible. Many believe that it's one of the greatest signs of God working a miracle in history, at least in a war scene. But one of the great moments was there were 850 ships called Well, 850 ships in the UK that decided that they would try and brave the channel, even though there were German submarines, even though there were German fighters and bombers firing on them, even though normally the English Channel wouldn't sustain anyone, even though their ships could likely and most likely would sink and capsize as they crossed the channel. There were 850 ships that said, "We will go. We'll go." And over the next couple of days, 850, what are now known in history as the little ships of Dunkirk, crossed the channel, rescued 338,000 soldiers off the beaches. And you know what's incredible to me about that story is you literally have no idea what kind of impact that you could make on the world. But if you were to say, "God, use my boat. God, use me." There are people who have nothing right now and they have no hope. There are people that you know considering suicide that have no hope. And possibly the good work that God has prepared in advance for you to do is to talk them to life. There are some people who are suffering physically, who maybe the good work that God has prepared in advance for you to do is to help them recover. I have no idea what God has planned for your life, but here's what I know. I know that God has prepared in advance things for you to do, and if you would say, "God, use me," He would. So here's what I want to do. We're going to take one more song as a time of reflection. And a time to just say, "God, use me." I only say that if you mean it, because serving is humbling. And serving is risky. And serving is a challenge. And serving is going to defy. Here's the deal. Some of us say, "I want to serve. I just don't want to be uncomfortable serving." What? No, that's serving. So if you're going, "God, I want to be used. I want my life to make a difference in others. God, I want you to take what I have, use whatever I have, and I want you to make a difference in the world. Because I don't want to look past those who are the least of these. I want to see them, and I want to encounter you in them." Guys, I think there's so much passion and purpose in giving our lives over to serving. But I can't do it for you. So in this next song, I want to invite you, if you're saying, "God, I'm willing," cry that out to Him. If you need prayer for anything tonight, you can always find some of our leaders around the room. But do something with me. Would you bow your heads? We're going to pray, and then I'm going to invite you to spread out as you need, stand up for worship, and reflect with the Lord. Father God, meet us here. But God, there's some in this room who need to be called to a life to be used. God, help us to be willing and ready to serve. To see the least of these and say, "I care about you. I'll serve you. I'll help you." God, to not overlook them. God, I pray that in this room tonight, some of us would be really compelled and we'd be changed for that. Help us, Lord, with that. In Jesus' name, amen.